the one comment that I'll make, and I think you guys have made it, Winky. It's so nice. It's a breath of fresh air from the outside looking in. Just because we've all kind of been our own community, and like I said earlier on, it felt like we all just enjoyed leveling. You guys, we all have similar interests. That's why we like the skate mode. But it's really unique and refreshing to have that community kind of latch on and be like, oh hey, there's a reason to level in hardcore. There's a reason to do the consistent process. Take it competitively, in their own price.
Yeah. I mean,
it's been really refreshing to see the game mode work to another community rather than like-minded people like ourselves.
Yeah, so when I joined their guild on my character, I'm not gonna lie, chat, I was there to meme the shit out of them and steal their death clips for us in chat. And the first time we did it was last week. We showed Gordon Ramsay dying, and then they didn't know that I showed them dying, right? And then I realized, like, you know what? Maybe let's just fucking bring them into the whole community, right? Why not? They're playing hardcore. Yeah, it's just sick as fuck. Like I love seeing people that have never experienced it, and yeah, Grace is right. It is super refreshing for me specifically. Hearing someone that's willing to say, like, I'm abandoning quests, I'm not going to go into a cave, right? And I guarantee you, when Soviet dies, he's going to reroll, as opposed to some other people, right? Like, he's going to go again because he's going to say, fuck, I just fucked that up. And it's just going to, the raider spirit in these people is going to be, I just fucked up big time. Next time, we're not wiping on that boss. Next week, we're going to come back and clear Nax, right? It's the same as hardcore, and I just think the correlation is pretty fucking. He says I'm not fucking dying, Winky. Soviet's on the blessed run, guys. He's on the blessed run. So, Grays, I've got a couple more clips, and you know at least a couple of them.
I know one of them. I'm assuming is gonna be here, and it's gonna hurt.
It's gonna hurt. So before we do the hurt, I'm gonna do something funny. We've got a couple funny deaths here. Now, Grace, I need sound on for this one. You're going to need to mute your mic. I'm not going to talk for this clip either. This is Rip2 Ghost, and you're going to find out very shortly, chat, why me and Grace are not going to talk. Okay? I'm just going to go ahead and click play now, Grace. So let's
I see Rip all the time. Let's see.
Yep, we're just going to ride it out.
Bro. What's up? All right. My name is Rip2 Ghost. I wanted to give a little color commentary on my death because I don't need Winky and Grace controlling the narrative. I'll roll the clip for you. Here I am. I'm in the K's in Loch Madon. And, you know, I want to say, you know, this is a Saturday night. Plenty of beers into this one. And I was feeling so comfortable because I had just gotten target dummies. So, you know, I was shooting the shit in guild chat. I'm like, oh, let me talk about, you know, my favorite zone, my this, my that. I'm feeling so good. And I'm fighting mobs that are like 5 levels lower than me. So, you know, I think I have good reason to be feeling good. I'm hanging out, and I'm so comfortable that I see a seer. I'm like, let me take another sip of my drink. Let me not even pay attention to this. Right, and then, you know, it's 20 seconds. Oh, here's a skull thumper. And then, wouldn't you know it, the Backstreet Boys show up, the entire crew. It's so many that Nasher abandons his post, and I'm trying to hit these target dummies, but I forget you have to do the whole goddamn clicky thing. There it is, you know, my whole life, right there. And there's a lot of disrespectful things about this deck. The first, though, is that this salty-ass LMAO comes into guild chat for me. Like, if you're typing that into guild chat, it's done. You're done. But even worse than that is the skull thumper thinks he's the Chad, thinks he's the big dog, coming to like laugh at my grave, like you're a level 14 humanoid, get out of here, go drop 3 linen cloth, my guy. And I gotta be honest, I was starting to think like hardcore is easy if you play in pet class, you know, but you don't pay attention for one goddamn second, you got the whole bunch on you, you know, and you're just surrounded and you forget how to target you is, but it is what it is. We all learn from our mistakes, right?
Yo, can we like and subscribe to this motherfucker's channel, dude? I love Rip2 Ghost. The Backstreet Boys come in. Yeah, we might have to have Rip to go for next week's episode.
Yo, I love that he did the honor of commentating over his own death because he knew.
Oh yeah, he knew we were gonna meme him.
He knew we were gonna get him.
I
That's
love
great,
it,
man.
dude.
Yo, the Dookie Trog got him every time. I'm telling you, that Trog is standing so far off the edge, he's dropping deuces on everybody's head. I don't know why he's standing there, but he aggroes every time. If you're in that cave in Lockbadon,
I went to that
guess
cave
he's just
today,
doing-
Grays, on my hunter, and I was like, I remember that those Backstreet Boys come down and fuck you up if you don't. So,
Rip was too many beers deep.
oh yeah. Yo, cheers to you, Rip to Ghost. By the way, he's one of the most badass people I've ever met. Wonderful guy in the community. You love to see Rip to Ghost around. If you got him in your chat, consider yourself lucky. Chat, another funny clip. We have the Silver Sable. Again, on her character immediately after her paladin
Something like
death.
to call this the rebound.
This is the Shadow Zone. Now, Silver, I'm not going to mean your high level death, okay? But this, Silver, I deserve this, okay? Bro, you're level 5. Explain it. Explain it. Okay, let's explain it, Grace. She says explain it. Well, Silver, you're fighting 2 enemies on a mage at level 5 in a cave, and you die. The tilt after a high level death is real. This is the Shadow Zone. Okay, so big ass brain move going down there, right? But then she doesn't know that mobs don't leash based on how far they run from their spawn point. It's like you can't. You just gotta kill him. Honestly, you probably could have kept kiting him too if you ran and jumped down again.
Welcome to the Shadow Zone, Silver.
It's Shadow Zone life.
She's checked in. We'll see how long it takes to get out.
So Silver likes to say that character was a imposter coming for the Stash Junior's inheritance from the Stash that died and left it for Stash Junior. I like to call this I just died on a high level character, so I made a new one and thought the game was easy.
You gotta respect the open world, even in the starting zone. I didn't see the beginning of the clip. I guess she didn't hold those 2 mobs with full health or something.
Goog's like not going to explain it via interpretive dance, or it would just be me falling on the ground doing an impression of the known death animation. Yeah, so she made the real Stash Junior, right? This Stash Junior wasn't the real Stash Junior. The real Stash Junior is alive and well. Factual evidence. Just don't do the Loch Madon run at level 12. This, Grays, you're going to be so familiar with who this is, dude.
No way! We actually got it. Oh, Cherry. This is how I felt about Parlor. Cherry one-shot the challenge.
Cherry, the infamous one-shot challenge. The Blood of Heroes clicker and liver.
The only survivor of Blood of Heroes I've ever seen. Patience and discipline is key. Cherry Warrior. Hall of Legends. Member. I didn't even know this was a thing. Cherry. I'm so glad that you popped Cherry.
Cherry Warrior.
We got the first.
Okay, a couple things before I start real quick. I've talked to Cherry Warrior in chat before. I've hung out with Cherry Warrior in other people's streams, in my stream, in his stream, whatever. Cherry, I've never gotten the chance to tell you this. There's a lot of things I really respect about you. But I fucking love your hair and your shirt. Cherry Warrior is a metal fan. I'm a metal fan. Anything that has a shirt that you can't read because it's in metal fan text, I'm a big fan of. So I just wanted to get that out there real quick. But let's watch what happens. They're in SFK, Grays. You know what the fuck's going to happen. Look where they are. They're right next to that ledge where 90 million mobs get pulled.
Oh, they're right under it? Yep.
Uh-huh.
I was trying to figure out what part of the room they were in.
Yeah, let's check it
They're
out.
right under it. Just to your left right there. Yep.
Cherry Warrior looks like like the goal I had of growing up to be when I was a kid. Throwing on my death metal shirts, playing WoW. Fucking, I don't have the hairline to have cool hair like that though.
Did it already happen? Did they pull the whole thing? You see where the druid stood right there on the staircase? Guys, they've already pulled. No one knows what's happening right now. Watch this. Give it like 5, 4. There it is.
Yep.
Oh my god! What the fuck's happened here? Why have they done that?
This is a rough clip. Remember when we had this clip contested once and I spent like 4 hours reviewing the VOD?
I do. Yep.
Cherry, if you jump to your right, you make it out alive. If you jump to your right and jump down the wall, you run out of the dungeon. Jump to your right. I don't think
And it just ends. Hold up, did he
Cherry made it out! Let's go,
He
Cherry!
didn't get the cherry death. Yeah, hate to see it.
Let's go!
Yeah,
Did you jump
absolutely
down,
hate to see
Cherry?
it. Ends.
If you jump to your right, you make it out alive. If you jump to your right and jump down the wall, you run out of the dungeon. Jump to your right. I don't think
And
he
it
made
just
out.
ends. Hold up, did he
Cherry made it out! Let's go,
He
Cherry!
didn't get the cherry death. Yeah, hate to see it.
Let's go!
Yeah,
Did you
absolutely.
jump down, Cherry? Wait, Cherry, how many people didn't make it out? Did you fuck over some people?
Dude, whenever I'm in SFK now, I'm like if it's not me, there's someone dedicated watching that ledge.
Oh, wait. Cherry's got another clip he says amazing. Hold on. What is this, Cherry?
Shouldn't have done that.
Cherry's a fucking gamer, dude.
It's pumping him.
2 out of 5 died? Holy shit. SFK's nuts, dude.
Again! You fucking idiots!
Oh, he's no defensive stance right here. That's funny. Just all.
I don't think you ever go defensive stance, right?
Yeah, no, I think it's like a challenge.
Oh, he's doing the like the battle stance challenge.
Only
or
battle
whatever it is.
stance. Yeah.
No!
Can't get that executed.
No! No, you bastard! Oh!
35 health?
Another. That's awesome, man.
Yo, Cherry, Cherry, you took the luck that I lost when I was doing my warrior, where I got parried 16 times in a row and died.
Did they kill each other at the same time? Is that what happened?
No, he lived.
Oh,
He lived with like 26 health. Grace, do we want to do it, dude? I mean, I've got 2 clips left for that are crazy.
Yeah, we can't end on like the craziest note. Guys, if you've been here, if you're thinking about leaving, this one's worth seeing.
They're,
I hate to say it that way.
they're all worth seeing, bro. So I've got. You know what? Let's do this. We're gonna do one clip, then we're gonna do the headline clip of the night.
Oh, jeez, come on.
You guys, yesterday was fucking bloody. Everybody, I'd like to introduce you to Chicken Basket, and after this death, this was his last hardcore character. He is taking a break from video games, period.
I know the feeling.
He left the Discord. He unmodded himself in the hardcore Discord.
He's 43. I died the last time I died at 39. I quit for 2 months.
This is some serious shit, guys. Chicken went on to focus on some real life shit, and this was his last tune.
Why is it so morbid? Why have we created a monster, Winky?
Oh, this hurts so bad to watch. It's you know what's funny is I wouldn't give a fuck if he died, right? But the fact that this was the last attempt that he's gonna make it hardcore before doing some real life shit, like it just hurts to watch, right? Like it just sucks. So he's level 43 warrior, and he goes in for a 3 pull, and he's getting the spin on his Herod axe. I don't know, dude. I don't know what's going on. He pots.
It's the offensive target dummy.
Well, no. So he
Retreat.
target dummies, and then he
Retreat.
says,
Retreat.
"I'm running," and then he says, "Fuck it, I'm going back in." He literally says it in the clip. He says, "I'm running," and then he goes, "Fuck it, I'm going back in." Hall of Legends member though, guys. He made it on Dr. Funk, the mage. Also, he runs the game nights on Fridays. Now, I think he said he's still going to continue to do the game nights. So we all need to at least tune into Chicken Basket's stream for the game night. Game night was so fun last week. Yeah, I think he legit said he wanted to keep doing them. So hopefully he sticks around for that. It's just so painful, man. And Grace, you've known Chicken Basket for years.
Oh yeah, we went to BlizzCon together. I went to BlizzCon with Chicken. He's the author of "You'd Love to See It."
Yeah, he created the "You Love to See It" emote.
Literally, this is.
And then Gray's content thief stole it.
I mean,
well, hey, you're not even smiling, bro. Gray's just said, "Yeah, I did."
like, comment. Yeah, I hate to see it.
I always wondered why you and Chicken had the same emote, and I was like, someone stole something from someone.
Oh, no, he came up with the term. I came up with the emote.
Okay.
And then I gave him the emote. But just right here, I've learned just you use your cooldowns defensively. He used his target dummy. I've died a few times using target dummy offensively, and that's what happens.
Oh man.
Yeah, hate to see it. Can we pay the respects? Spam some Fs.
Yeah. If you have Chicken emotes, spam them. I'm staying subbed. I don't give a fuck if he gets off Twitch. I'm staying subbed. I know, Graves, you probably required 10 people to gift you a sub. But you know what I was so surprised, Graves, when you stream sniped me the other day and you tried to kill me through 19th link. I was more surprised that you spent the $15 to activate that account than you ever would have been to kill me. Like
I was thinking about Fs, man. I was putting your ass on your own show. I wanted to put you on Fs in chat. Oh,
Grace, you came into my chat afterwards. You're like, bro, I just spent $15 That's 15 hamburgers, bro. I could eat for a week. Oh no. I don't know what to say about this, guys. This is gonna be our last clip for the night. I'm gonna check a few.
Yeah, do we have any? Okay. Dokken TV. He almost one-shot the challenge. He died to a 25-minute fight in the southern cave in Ungoro Crater on his 53 Paladin originally. He quit. He came back months later. He died at 55, 53 again. 250 plus deaths in a row. He re-rolled, motivated more than ever before. And then this happened last night. I was editing a video. I actually had Dokken's stream pulled up. You can't see the context before this. There's a quest in Western Plaguelands. He ran into the house. He turned in the quest. He turned, he bubbled to just run away, and he blessed the freedom to run away. But these are freezing ghouls. And I know we never cover this content. I'm just going to let the clip roll, and I'll probably just walk away. This is it. This one hurts, man. Dokken has something to prove. If he... Did Nom Nom die 3 times in a row, 50 plus, or 2 times? I thought it was 2.
3 times 40 plus. He was 46, 53, and 54, something like that.
So Nom Nom has been like a massive example of Dokken. I mean, whether he likes it or not, everybody's watching, dude, to see if he gets back on the saddle.
He's already on the saddle. He's already back on it.
Paladin.
I stopped in Dokken's chat today and I said, bro, you know what's so crazy to me is like, I'm like a big, like, I don't know, this is going to sound super fruity, but like, you know how some people say that there's like people have like love languages, right? Well, like words of encouragement would be one of mine, right? So like words, like the things that people tell me, like if someone writes me a note or like leaves me something written on a post-it note or whatever, it like really impacts me in my life. And I stopped by Dokken's stream and I just typed, "We go again" in his chat, and he smiled. And I was like, what a fucking Chad, dude. This guy, like, he is committed to pumping that Paladin to 60. And he is so committed. he went immediately and rerolled Paladin. It's fucking dope. It's just sick. Like, this shit's like transcendental, bro. Like, this is wild, dude. Insane. But yeah, let's check it out. Let's check it. Grace, now you know what happened prior to the clip, right? So like, you can explain that.
I literally, I couldn't believe I was watching it live. Those 3 freezing ghouls are just outside of that house right there behind. He just turned in the quest. He bubbled, assuming he could get out of it. Fuck, dude. These, it's end game. Freezing ghouls incapacitate you, and then mobs don't break that incapacitation. So if you have 4 mobs on you.
No, he even used Blessing of Freedom, right? Like, I don't think it works for this.
I don't know why, but the freezing ghouls.
No target dummies, of course, right?
He's out for me.
You're just stuck, dude, in your ways. Like, you're just stuck.
Yeah, this one really did hurt. Normally, like, I'm a doomer at heart. I watched it live and I wasn't even smiling. Like, it was. I mean, now that it's. Fuck. I'm so sorry.
Well, you're a doomer, Grace. Like, and you and I kind of look forward to death.
I do.
Dawkins different, bro. He's built
I've seen this model before. Freezing ghoul. I almost pulled 2 of them on one of my. I think it was the shaman. And if you pull 2 freezing ghouls, you're almost dead because they freeze you and they continue to attack you.
Yeah.
And they just chain freeze you.
Well, like it hurt my heart when I saw Silver die. I'm not gonna lie, because I saw that live, right? It hurt. It hurt to watch. This hurts more because I know that he's been here before. 2 times. This is like when we would watch Rocksteady, dude. Like when Rocksteady would die 6 times on a fucking warrior, like 40 plus. It just sucks, dude. It just hurts to watch, man. That being said, though, guys, can we give Dawkins a follow? Let me spam Dawkins follow real quick. Fuck, bro. Anyone in chat, if you want to support Dawkins _TV, don't go to Grace Clips. I don't have the _TV on mine. We're doing a fucking D&D game. I am hosting a D&D game. Well, I'm not hosting it, but I'm DMing a D&D game with Dawkins, Silver Sable, Tuna Tornado, and Cargos. So if anyone's interested, tune in for that. Dawkins a great guy. That poor guy, dude. No, he didn't, dude. Chat, we're gonna send the raid over to Dawkins, and yeah, holy shit, wow. Voivod just lost $10,000. We're gonna cover that next week on Extra Chat. Make sure you tune in. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. And by the way, please support Dawkins, guys. When you get there, I know a lot of people like to leave and go do the rest of their night, but honestly, leaving the stream on changes lives. You know, just please do me a huge favor, and cover or just chill with him for a little bit. It's his time of need. He just died for the 3rd time on a 50+ paladin. So let's show him some love. Next week we can cover Voivod dying, I guess.
You know, it's been pretty great over the last couple of years developing something of an audience, you know, following and YouTube subscribers and fans and people on Twitter who want to know what I have to say about stuff. But to be honest, it's getting kind of annoying. I'm kind of sick of having them. So I thought the best way to get rid of them would be to start a new YouTube video series exploring the theory and philosophy and politics of various aspects of film that I feel aren't explored enough. That should do the trick. And along the way I might remind people of some of my more contrarian opinions, like the fact I think the Star Wars prequels are actually pretty good. Stuff like that. I just did it then, didn't I? Welcome to Scanline. If If you're older than the age of 20 or have parents that don't throw things out, then you probably have at least a couple of these things in an attic or a shed somewhere.
These are video home system cassette tapes, commonly known as VHS tapes. They entered use in the late 1970s and were a very popular way of watching films and TV shows in your own home anytime you wanted, which for the time was a really novel and new concept.
With Selectavision, you can go to the movies at your house.
I know this because I looked it up on the Wikipedia page when I was writing this script.
But let's get into what the world's largest encyclopedia doesn't want you to know.
As small towners, we've always had a heart for the heartland.
Which is why we're excited to join T-Mobile's Hometown Initiative.
As the leader in 5G, T-Mobile is investing billions in 5G upgrades for small towns across America. We're bringing more choice and affordability and creating 7,500 new jobs in rural America over the next few years.
Check out everything T-Mobile can do for your town. Visit T-Mobile.com/across America.
You do a lot to protect your family right now. We're here to help you protect them in the future. Safeguard your family with a will, trust, or power of attorney from LegalZoom. Let's make it official.
If you weren't in front of the TV when a show aired or hadn't gone to the cinema when a film was out, your primary interaction with most pieces of modern entertainment and culture would have been through the medium of VHS. Almost every piece of audiovisual art you consumed, no matter what it was made with, shot on, or how advanced the budget and special effects, you saw it via the signal produced from the magnetic reels in these plastic boxes. If you fell in love with a story, it was probably thanks to these tapes. It's a pity, then, that they look like shit. A standard PAL VHS recording consisted of roughly 320 horizontal lines and 576 vertical lines of visual information. Worse, you wouldn't actually be getting your films at that resolution, since most films were produced in wide or super widescreen, but VHS was for the 4:3 resolution of contemporary televisions. You had a problem even showing a film. You could crop out the sides of a film and move the screen around, what's called pan and scan, which could totally ruin the story of films where multiple things were happening on different sides of the frame, or you could scale the whole thing down and add black bars to the top and bottom, creating what was called the letterbox effect. On the pan and scan version of A New Hope, the opening text crawl doesn't fit the screen, so you have to wait until it gets here before you can even possibly read it. In the widescreen version, you can see the entire line of text as soon as it enters the frame, but it's scaled down, so it's just as hard to read. I always really liked this scene from Aliens, where Burke is trying to be friendly with Ripley in hospital, so he brings Jonesy in and sits backwards in his chair and spins playfully in it while the camera pulls in and gets more intimate, so he can then tell her that she's been frozen for 57 years. There's lots of good moments of subtle acting and characterization, and I like the cinematography of this cool sci-fi room, and there's a cute cat in the frame too. The pan and scan version of this scene just barely manages to get both characters in the frame at once. It completely removes a lot of Burke's body language as he tries to be nice while preparing to break the news to her, and poor Jonesy's head is cut off. Jonesy isn't in this film after the beginning. Does Jonesy over here look happy with pan and scan? I don't think he does, but I can't actually tell. Even worse, because of the vile machinations of capitalism, the first preferred solution by movie studios was pan and scan. So they sold all the films like that, and then once they figured out that directors hated having their films recut to fit the new frame and widescreen was basically objectively superior because it displayed the entire film, they got to sell you the films all over again, with the promise that this time it was better.
Now, for the first time on video, you can savor the true experience of these blockbusters in their original format. Widescreen.
My copy of the Aliens Special Edition... Sorry, the Aliens Special Edition? Apparently I bought this tape from a xenomorph. Opens with a commercial for the widescreen versions of Alien and Die Hard. The fuckers. And guess what? This version of Aliens is in pan and scan. This is already the special edition of Aliens, and now you're telling me I'm gonna have to buy it again when the widescreen special edition comes out? 20th century Fox, more like 22nd century Wayland Yutani. I'm sorry.
And that was it. That was how people watched films. They picked their poison between a tiny version of the original film or a recut, reframed, gutted, despicable, cat-erasing version of the original, and whichever one you picked, you got it in this flickery format. You got this facsimile of the film that you wanted to see. And that was how we consumed media. For decades.
Some versions of the above-average fantasy film series Star Wars only ever widely existed on this format. Many fans of Star Wars all over message boards and forums and my mentions fell in love with the films because of tapes they rented or bought. Because of this. But wait a minute. We can talk about specs and make fun of the video quality all day. People still watched them, people still used them to record shows off the TV, and people still shared and circulated those recordings. Thanks to people wanting to see things and needing tape to do so, homemade tapes are still the only way to find copies of shows that weren't available in any official format. Many episodes of Mystery Science Theater didn't get a proper release for years after their initial air date, and many still don't. Prior to high-speed internet, the only way of accessing these old episodes was through home recordings people happened to have made at the time the show aired. You'd be amazed at what hoops folks would jump through to see a show they liked, even on a low-res home tape recording. And what if you were a fan of anime in the era prior to major home video releases of foreign animation? Why, you would have to hope you knew a store with crazy import stuff with really poor fan translations, or hope someone had taped the shows that did make it over at the crazy times they turned up. In retrospect, the format wasn't great, but it was certainly good enough for audiences who wanted to watch something in the comfort of their own homes whenever they wanted to, and it was basically the first format that allowed people to do this. It led to widespread consumption of material that would otherwise be forgotten or go unseen. In the 70s and 80s, for the first time ever, a regular person could have an archive of shows or films they enjoyed without having to get a projector and go in search of film reels on eBay, which would be really hard to do, considering that eBay didn't exist until 1995. A person could learn about and consume elements of their culture and develop an understanding of film so much more easily than the decades prior. In fact, Quentin Tarantino and Kevin Smith worked in local video stores before becoming directors, giving them an opportunity to further incubate their own passion for film as well as share it directly with others before going on to make some of the most influential films, for better or worse, of the 1990s. The advent of VHS ushered in a new era of accessibility for film fans. Tastes in film and appetites for film could be developed much more rapidly than ever before. It marked the beginning in a radical and permanent shift in media consumption. You were no longer reliant on what was playing in your local multiplex or what old French films the weird art schools were projecting that month. And you no longer had to adhere rigidly to TV's schedules or catch films or TV shows deemed worthy of being shown. The shift was so radical that film companies panicked. Then MPAA head Jack Valenti, in an act of comical hyperbole, said in a congressional hearing that the VCR is to the American film producer and the American public as the Boston Strangler is to the woman home alone. Universal Studios even sued Sony on the grounds of copyright infringement over their Betamax video recording format. Luckily, it was ruled that home recording devices operate under fair use, and of course, once film companies realized how profitable home video could be, they backed off. Many films started being made with their sales on the burgeoning and seemingly never-endingly hungry VHS market in mind, or even without the intent of ever being screened in a theatre. Some were barely even films. They were instructional videos, or Christmas-themed cat nightmares, or musical propaganda for a Christian cult that lived in the woods. Lots of popular films did well on tape, but still others did hugely well on tape, more so than you could expect from their cinematic release or critical reception. The question here is why? What is it about being available on VHS that made people suddenly become connoisseurs of horror or independent film? Well, those reasons tend to get overlooked. Let's look at some of them right now. When making the film Jaws, which would come to be regarded as the first ever summer blockbuster, Spielberg and co. discovered some problems with the shark prop, a prop many would regard as quite important in a film about a shark that eats people. The animatronics kept breaking down, bits kept falling off of it, and most importantly, it kept sinking. The fake shark had trouble floating in water. Spielberg instead had to rely on using shots of almost everything but the shark to demonstrate the horror of its presence, show the aftermath, show explosions of blood in the distance, show the actors' reactions. The result was a film where you barely ever get to see the animatronic shark, but its presence is felt regardless. The shark is rendered even scarier by not being shown in all its glory, and its glory wasn't really all that much to see anyway. It was a broken mechanical shark. Tobe Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre is an incredibly startling and foundational film in the horror genre. When James Furman, a British censor and secretary of the BBFC at the time, tried to cut the film to reduce its violent and nightmarishly oppressive atmosphere, he found, to his own personal shock, that he couldn't. There isn't all that much actual violence or blood in the film. There are no single pieces or shots you could remove to diminish its effects. Instead, it's a cumulative effect of all the properties of the entire film in setting a tone and creating a mood without needing to show you anything in particular. In the end, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was refused a certification by the BBFC, effectively banning it in the United Kingdom. What these stories tell us is that even in visual mediums, supposedly all about showing people things, for achieving some effects, often less is more. The human mind is incredibly good at scaring itself, and sometimes not being shown what you're supposed to be scared of is the worst thing. Confusion settles in, fear of what could be there, what could happen fills your head, and your imagination with its own particular fears gets to substitute those over whatever's actually there. Texas Chainsaw Massacre did fantastically well when it was released in 1981, allowing many Brits access to the film for the first time. But many horror films did well on tape, even if they relied much more on gore or were poorly cut, and this is because of a particular form of this principle. Let's think about VHS again. That awful, tiny resolution, flickery screen, even pure blackness is off-kilter. If you walked into a room with this playing, you might even think you're watching a scene of something hiding in darkness. I bet you can almost make out a figure hidden there in all the noise. You see where I'm going with this now, don't you?
Here's Alien, one of the best, most emotionally intense and scary films ever, on VHS. And through these tapes, Alien was flipping terrifying. I remember being out of my mind scared by this low-res monstrosity. And it wasn't just because of the great acting, directing, editing, creature design or music. It was because, in all the tensest and darkest moments, you could never really quite be sure what you were looking at. Abstract shapes in the background could almost look like something else. The flickers and noise in the darkness were easily confused for glimpses of the monster. Even when you were sure nothing was there, you could never really be sure. When the monster actually turned up, it was almost a relief. Like, at least now, you knew where the creature actually was.
You want to sell your product. Consumers want to see its value. With quality product video ads, everyone gets what they want. Get yours made today on Fiverr.
Save up to 70% on your favorite brands at Nordstrom Rack.
So good, so good, so good. I got what I need and it feels so good. So good, so good, so good. Hey, it's gonna be a good day. Hey, it's all going my way. So good, so good, so good. Doing it for me and it feels so good.
Rack your look at Nordstrom Rack. In-store, in-app, and online.
In other words, a lower resolution format can increase the emotional impact of a scene. Horror and suspense have the chance to strike people like it never had before. No wonder films like this did well. In some ways, modern high-resolution versions of these films can't quite capture that particular magic. Here's a scene from the Blu-ray version. It looks great, but it's not as scary because you can quite definitely see that nothing's there. You know the character is alone in ways that you couldn't be certain of before. Really good films actually put this principle into practice within the medium itself. For example, Alien and Aliens both have sequences that prominently feature the use of cameras and video feeds with a very poor signal. Even if the higher resolution version of the film does diminish some of the horror elements, these segments still hold up exactly like they always did, because the effects of viewing low-resolution video are worked into the aesthetic of the film. As a kid, David Cronenberg rotated his TV antenna to pick up signals he wasn't supposed to access, late at night when there wasn't supposed to be anything on the air.
Well, what if the images that you pulled up were really quite extreme, disturbing, possibly illegal? And what would you think then? Would you keep seeking out those channels, or would you call the police, or what would you do? How would you respond to that?
The fear and excitement he felt in anticipation of what he might see, that fear of what was out there hidden in the static, inspired him to make Videodrome. So at least one great horror film was conceived entirely because of this effect. Horror and slasher films did really well on tape for this reason, and many films became long-running series that probably wouldn't ever have done so without such successful post-cinema releases on a format that arguably made them scarier. Even boring or flat shots in mediocre films can be made more tense by telling the audience a killer is out to get the protagonists,
and making it just a little bit tougher to see where they could be hiding. This also solves another problem. Those of you who watched my, in retrospect, woefully unfocused and unresearched video from 2016 about what makes action films work will remember I made a comment about how the CGI in Terminator 2 used to look better. Well, here we are.
Thank you, Shannon, for helping me edit this video and stop it taking another year.
Computer graphics and animation were largely lacking in the 80s, 90s, and even the early 2000s. Nothing really quite looked right, things didn't feel like they were really there, texture and displacement mapping wasn't up to snuff, and you had smooth-looking, weird stuff in your frame. It wasn't great. But even mediocre CGI can blend right in on tape. This checkerboard man rising out of the floor to murder a guy made me scared of my kitchen floor going to the fridge at night as a hyperactive child. It was vivid, like in my mind's eye Robert Patrick was going to come out at any moment and cut my entire body off. Seeing the now easily available high-definition version of this scene made me feel like an idiot. My mind had done most of the work with the bad fidelity. I think people who saw this scene in a theatre kind of had the scariest bits of the film ruined for them, because in the film prints shown in theatres this would have stuck out just as much. But it wasn't just the relative badness of the image that popularised certain things over others in the medium of the video home system. Another important facet was the fact that, well, it was in your home. Like I said before, Texas Chainsaw Massacre was effectively not allowed into cinemas when it was first released in the UK. While some local councils allowed it to be shown in their theatres, the viewing experience would have been quite weird. You'd be openly going out and paying to sit and see something you knew was banned in other areas for being violent and horrific. It was like you were committing a crime, or were openly telling people you wanted to see that stuff since you'd actively gone and sought it out. But the uncensored 1981 video release did amazingly, and it's quite clear why. Instead of going out and sitting in a public space for 90 minutes and then awkwardly shuffling out trying not to make eye contact with the other people who'd come to see this widely banned film, you saw it with an audience of your choosing in the privacy of your own home at a time that suited you. There was a sense of being free of judgment. The eyes of the outside world were no longer a factor in your viewing experience. This encouraged people to seek out films they'd never go to see in public, which of course includes pornography. It's really not hard to see why home video almost immediately killed porn theaters. Kevin Smith has happily recounted his time renting porn to customers, saying once you're comfortable with someone renting porn, you can have conversations with them, and that having a frank conversation with someone about their sex life informed his work a great deal. Home viewing also allowed for a less adult form of privacy, a kind of comfortable intimacy with friends or family that you can't get in a theatre. Getting together on the couch with a bowl of popcorn and the glow of a television to watch a scary movie is an oft-repeated familial ritual, in much the same way that gathering around a campfire bathed in orange light to tell ghost stories has been for generations. There are also other factors. You might have noticed that prior to the 90s, television was shot very straightforwardly and blankly, with actors even in close-ups framed very differently from films shot at the same time. This is because televisual language has to serve a different purpose from film language. Movies are giant, projected way up and away from you, staring down at you and occupying your entire view. You are consumed by a film and encouraged to think about it and its composition. You don't do anything else in a cinema but watch the film. A television is a smaller screen, often a good distance from you, even in a kitchen where other noises and events are distracting you. You might even be reading a book or talking to someone else while the TV is playing. The early TV production style knew that you weren't always going to be paying attention, only pulling you in for the more dramatic or important moments of a given episode, usually using something like having music start to play. The smaller screen also changes the way we relate to the image and the people in it. Television can be more human, friendlier. Those little people on the screen are having a nice chat about current events and I feel somewhat included or informed. A talk show blown up to 70 feet staring down at you in a darkened room with surround sound blasting in your ears would be overpowering to say the least. And it turns out the aesthetic and design of some films are predisposed to mesh beautifully with the qualities of the television. Nothing exemplifies this in practice quite like Mallrats. Mallrats was Kevin Smith's second film, produced after the success of his first picture, the small, self-funded indie hit Clerks. When Mallrats came out, no one really got it. People who loved the low-budget, avant-garde, doing-it-ourselves, grainy aesthetic of Clerks hated the well-produced, overly slick feel. People who cared about editing or cinematography or good-looking shots got a kind of flat-looking film with a bunch of boring, wide shots of multiple people just sort of talking about stuff. Serious critics into the pointed, pop-culturally slanted insights of Clerks and the honest thoughts of astray Gen Xers were treated to a bunch of wacky characters farting about in a mall, tricking people they didn't like into making their hands smell like shit. The film did terribly critically and at the box office. It looked like Kevin Smith, the indie darling behind Clerks, had basically torched his career with only his second film. Luckily, a film would then come out which would miraculously untorch his career. That film was called Mallrats on Tape. In 2001, on the subject of criticism of his films, Smith said, "We should be able to make any movie we want, stupid or not, so long as it doesn't cost too much and is reasonably guaranteed to make its money back for our distributor. That, for the curious, is why we're allowed to keep making movies. Some cats..." Oh, I hate how he talks. Some cats, particularly the denizens of internet movie chat boards, can't figure out why we're allowed to continue lensing flicks when we never seem to grow as visual storytellers or keep making, what's to them, the same movie. The answer is that we've never lost anybody money. I'll say that again, we've never lost anybody money. Granted, we came close with Rats, but even that made a killing on video and, more recently, DVD. Despite box office troubles, the same film no one went to see and critics snubbed was suddenly doing gangbusters, making it an even more interesting sort of cult hit than its predecessor. And it's because of the aesthetic differences of playing a film on a TV. All of a sudden, the shot composition isn't as important because it's kind of far away from you and you're doing something else in the room while it plays, and the low quality of the format means that even if the shots were particularly good, you wouldn't really have noticed anyway. You aren't having the aimless banter about nothing blasted at you from speakers all around you like it's the most important thing in the world and you have to listen to every second. It's playing nearby, and you're just kind of listening in on these people talking free associatively about their film opinions. With this change in the viewing experience, all of a sudden, Mallrats makes sense. It becomes a funny little film, where the big scenes and funnier jokes grab your attention and the stuff that falls flat or isn't so well directed doesn't matter so much because it's easier to ignore. Here's an IMDb review from 2003. Brad C-2 from Auckland, New Zealand jokingly says the film is best watched with your eyes closed. They criticised the look and feel of the film and the hamminess of the overall plot, but they loved the dialogue and they found it sharp and effervescent, and they say it's their favourite film of Kevin Smith's. I would say so far, but honestly, considering the films he made after 2003, Mallrats is probably still their favourite. Kevin Smith films screened in a theatre on a big screen are arguably missing the point. The joy of these films is in crowding around a small TV at your friend's house and watching little people on it with no pretensions of grandiosity, being shitty to customers and talking about their lives. If you've sat down and watched Mallrats screened in a high resolution in a cool retro revival screening at your local college, unsubscribe from my channel immediately, Kurt. We talked about this. I don't want to be your friend anymore. Imagine all the films from across history that were doomed to be misunderstood by the theatre-going audience, whose real destiny was to be truly appreciated on the small screen where the viewer's relationship with the work was completely different. VHS was the first second chance for those films, and it created an appreciation for these kinds of story, for televisual filmmaking. You can see this trend happening in reverse as televisions get bigger and their picture becomes clearer and their aspect ratio more film-like. TV shows with a cinematic approach like Breaking Bad, Mad Men, The Sopranos or Hannibal are becoming more prominent and popular. HBO calls itself home box office because the home viewing experience is finally akin enough to a theatre that these aesthetic changes can really be appreciated. People didn't just not care about having television that wasn't very nice looking for 60 years. Our relationship with the screen simply changed in accordance with its change in format and size in our living rooms. In the age of HD and TV on demand, soap operas are waning in popularity as the increased fidelity and the typical viewer's filmic awareness exposed the show's production failings and straightforwardness more than the older ways could. And the idea that you could be watching Game of Thrones or House of Cards at any time suddenly makes Neighbours a bit less of a thing that you might want to watch, although people still watch it all the time over here and it's a little bit scary. They make it in Australia, but they make it for us because we're the only people who watch it. Why are we... I'm a little bit worried this might once again make it harder for some films to be appreciated because you even watch them like a film at home. But it's not like we're going to just stop making television shows, so we're probably fine for now. People will always want higher fidelity versions of their favourite films. Some people want a high-res version of the original cuts of Star Wars so badly that they've resorted to making that version themselves, with different restorations pulling from 35mm prints, 70mm prints, a TV broadcast, DVD special features and more, all in the service of recreating the films they remember from way back when. You can also see this battle happening on the filmmaking end. A filmmaker will always find newer and better cameras on the market, more bit depth, better codecs, 1080p, 4K, 6K, 8K sensors, all for footage that will often end up getting seen on YouTube at whatever resolution their audience's computer monitors or phone screens happen to be, with YouTube's compression algorithm eradicating most of the specs of their footage. Looking good doesn't necessarily mean having the best definition. Telling a good story is the goal, and if you get that wrong, not even doing showing it on an Arri Alexa can save you. Obviously, shoot on the best equipment you can get your hands on, and aim for a form of distribution that best suits your work. But I think the real challenge is to make something that people would fall in love with, even if they were watching it on a crappy old tape in the 90s. And in its own way, whether we like it or not, those tapes and the impact they had will never leave us. The format is in our history now, and we remember it. Nostalgia is real, and it affects how we view old films or perceive new films that use it as a purposeful style. Many films made in the vein of 80s or 90s horror get limited little VHS releases because that's the style they were courting in the first place. Then there are the immensely popular retro camcorder phone apps you can get, and the web skits that use the aesthetic as part of a deeper throwback to kitschy 90s children's programming. Many new films exist only in the form of tapes or what are designed to look like low-res rips of tapes, like the truly fascinating, funny and smart WNUF Halloween special, in order to channel the style and further create a sense of seeing a documented record of a time period. One film that combines all of this with tape's ability to make cheap special effects look better is the found footage film VHS, an anthology of a bunch of short films from various diegetic videotapes, and its relative low-budget effects are done real justice by the aesthetic. The final segment, 10:31:98, has a truly fascinating climactic sequence where everything goes completely crazy nuts, and it's the most frighteningly real a horror segment with what are actually fairly rudimentary effects has ever felt. Because the poor quality of the footage makes it so much more believable. If you filmed a window actually sliding out of existence and hands coming out of the walls on a camera from this time period, it would literally look exactly the same as this footage, and knowing that makes the sequence infinitely punchier and more real feeling than the same effect would in any modern horror film.
Growing up, I think the first favourite film I ever had was Terry Gilliam's Time Bandits. I think it was the first film I ever saw where seeing it I felt like it was made for me.
It took my sense of alienation from adult life and channeled it into telling a story about a vividly imaginative world where the outsiders were the ones who were truly free, escaping from their parents, invading armies, and even the will of God in getting what they wanted out of life. It made me feel good to not be like everyone else, like I was getting one over on the world somehow. This film helped make me who I am and shape how I see everything, and it did it on my dad's tiny television in letterbox widescreen. Obviously, for the sake of preservation and film history, a high-res official version of Hand Shooting First would be nice to have. We can chase higher and higher resolutions as much as we want, and we should. I think they look great. But the funny and kind of amazing thing is, millions of people only needed a fifth of those lines of resolution on a tiny screen to fall in love with these films and have them shape how they see the world. For me, Time Bandits is the objectively crappy version I saw as a kid over and over on a tiny widescreen tape in the night when no one else was around, feeling inspired by the sense of adventure and briefly pausing to go to the kitchen for a snack and get scared by the floor. All the K's in the world won't replicate the experience I had as a kid. It might even ruin it by revealing all the obvious models and matte paintings and all the wood screws on the sets for what they really were. VHS was always a kinda bad format. But in spite and because of all its problems, it caused a dramatic shift in pop culture and in the taste and approaches to cinema by viewing audiences, which is still felt to this very day, in the form of the cinema literacy and particular feel and taste it cultivated, even by accident, with its style.
Oh no, look what happened by accident.
Here I am in my childhood bedroom. That's what it is. This is what my childhood bedroom was.
Look, I think all that matters is that I had a normal childhood and my experiences make for hashtag relatable content!
Because recently I've been thinking an awful lot about nostalgia. You're probably wondering, why are you filming on a bed with all of these stuffed toys? Are you trying to rip off Jenny Nicholson so that you can finally catch up to her in terms of subscribers? And the answer to that question is... yeah, but also for another reason. Okay, we're going to get into some real deep H-bomb lore here. But for the first decade of my channel, it was basically just a place where I posted whatever random videos I thought were funny, and Let's Plays and stuff like that. But I also used to do like a web series that was making fun of video blogs, which is me with a camcorder messing about. It was silly. In that old video series, I used to have a sequence where I would go to my bed to answer viewer emails, and really it was just a way of using all the jokes that I thought of that had nothing to do with the rest of the theme of the video. Basically, it was just a technique used to justify doing something completely unrelated to what people actually wanted or expected. And so I'm using it now for a different reason, sitting on these bed, because sitting on this bed with these ancient sheets from 1996, 7, I'm guessing, makes me feel nostalgic for an earlier point in my life. And that's what this video is going to be about. Speaking of the past, the 1980s were really interesting. I was born in the 90s, so my real love was the stuff I had access to, like Pokemon and Power Rangers, you know, where they beat up cool monsters and did fighting and there was explosions and giant robots. It was a kid's dream. And the music was so catchy that they've been reusing that same riff in bits of music for the last, like, 25 years. Oh, wow. I've learned how to feel old. But a secret fascination of mine was the 80s. To me, they were like the dark times. This period from before I was born, and we had all of these ancient artifacts from it that only I could make sense of. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and He-Man and the Transformers weren't really for me. They were for kids from a previous generation. And luckily for me, thanks to VHS, a format that I've heard someone cool made a video about once, I could rewatch these ancient stories from the before time over and over without ever having to develop a personality. Transformers in particular was really cool. But then one day, in Blockbusters, and I only realised now how dated this video is going to be, I saw a copy of a tape for The Transformers, the movie. And that's weird, because I thought movies were for adults and not kids who watch their favourite stuff at 5 in the morning or however early I used to be able to wake up. So I forced my dad to rent it, and I spent a weekend watching it over and over and storing all of its images in my brain for the rest of time. There are some powerful images in that film which will never leave me. I never learned an instrument, but in my adolescent and then later adult years, I noticed that a lot of people my age or slightly older didn't really remember the show in that much detail, but still remembered a lot of stuff from that movie, and they might not have even seen it for decades. And I've been curious for quite a while about how it ended up that way, so lately I rewatched some of the show and then the movie to try to figure out how to... Actually, no. I don't really have a justification for my life choices in such a clear-cut way like that. To be honest, most of my videos are me hastily writing an introduction and a conclusion to the bit that I just felt like making for no particular reason. And this time I just don't have one. I'm going to talk about the Transformers show and the 1986 movie for an amount of time, and you can watch it if you'd like. I'm gonna make that the thumbnail. Something I didn't really realize as a kid, and probably should have done, is that the Transformers show is basically just a really explicit toy commercial. I was really curious how a show could come to be like this, so I asked my father, Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, how it came to be, and he told me it was all the fault of that capitalist pig dog Reagan. Ronald McDonald Reagan was, of course, president of the United States for most of the 80s, and he famously hated regulation almost as much as he hated South American civilians. I believe that prior to Reagan, broadcasters weren't allowed to do more than 12 minutes per hour of advertising. And, you know, a show which is basically selling a toy
probably would have counted as advertising. Reagan took office in 1981 and his FCC oversaw a complete overhaul of all these regulations, putting the free market in charge of what children could see. And as we know, Reagan's policies are beyond criticism. My generation grew up being advertised to every waking moment of their entire lives, and all of us turned out fine. And that allowed the creation of shows like My Little Pony, G.I. Joe, He-Man, Mask, which I just remembered now while filming this bit, and, yes, Silverhawks. Partly metal, partly real. I mean the Transformers. These robots fight every episode, and then at the end, the status quo is usually restored, and maybe another robot turns up who can show off their amazing new abilities. And it's in stores now. And by now, I mean 30 years ago. Oh my god. I think the go-to example from this, of the episodes I watched, is the one called Bot. Okay, there's this one robot called Bruticus, who's like a big, really powerful robot. He's way bigger than all the others, because he's actually made of 5 smaller Decepticons, and they all team up and go, "Bah." He's the most powerful one. He's just this utter destructive killing machine. Anyway, in this episode, he gets shot once and completely falls apart, destroyed so completely that 4 of the 5 robots are just in bits, like dead, and there's only one survivor. So getting completely obliterated and literally scrapped for parts, and the parts get put in other things. They put the personality component in another robot for a while, and like it runs off, and there's this really funny shot of it like diving through a window. Anyway, so that can happen. But it's fine, they just get rebuilt, and they're totally okay. There is no real death in this universe, and that's fine. I'm not asking for a children's show in which there's murder. It's actually a really effective way of writing a show with a limited cast of characters. It means that you can have people getting beat up, people get destroyed, there are fights and people lose badly, but they can be rebuilt, so they can carry on going, so you don't have to continuously be churning out new characters. It's also quite similar to how kids play with toys. You know, when you're a kid and one of your toys dies in whatever thing you're playing, you don't give it like a Viking funeral and then you don't bury it in the ground because you can't use it anymore. That's my secret strategy for winning in Warhammer. I insist on giving every character of mine that gets killed a proper funeral with a eulogy. After like the 5th one, my opponent always surrenders. They never want to play with me again, but I like to think it's because I taught them a harsh lesson about the horrors of war. Basically, Transformers is the kind of story where no one can really die. You get blown up, and they put you back together at the end of the episode, and then you do it all again. It's that kind of show. It's very comfy and easy to get into a rhythm, and you can watch 100 episodes of it. And it's not particularly challenging, but it doesn't have to be. It's for kids. And it's actually quite nice and relaxing to live in a universe where seemingly nobody can die. It's quite nice. Anyway, in the opening of the Transformers movie, a planet gets destroyed and millions of people die. Yeah, there's a bit of a tone difference in the movie. Like, we see an actual civilization full of people going about their everyday business. There's even like malls and shopping centers. And then we get to watch them get completely obliterated and devoured by this giant monster. I don't really remember the movie being that different as a kid. I remember the show being like really cool and kind of violent. There was lasers and explosions. But as an adult, the difference is like so clear and shocking. Something is clearly very different from the previously consequence-free cartoon. I mean, the episode where the guy gets blown up into tiny pieces and put back together is the episode before the movie. And it's like, you go right from that to this. Let's take a moment to talk about Unicron as a character. Because as a kid, he was the big bad guy robot of the movie. But as an adult, I think Unicron represents something, actually stands in for something. Nihilism? Like, the Transformers universe has a god, according to its wiki. It's called Primus. I think in some continuities, he's literally Cybertron. And just, you know, just pretending to be a planet. It's a robot in disguise. But at least in the philosophical sense, Unicron is the closest thing we see in this universe to, like, a god. Like, it's absolutely gigantic. It's incomprehensibly powerful. It can destroy entire planets. But what's interesting about it, not him, it, is it doesn't do it because it's evil or bad. Maybe they change this in characterization later, but in the film it's very clear that it's eating. This is how it feeds to survive. It's this almost Lovecraftian thing. It's so much bigger than us, and all it wants to do is eat, and we just happen to be food on the planet it's eating. And its insides are this bizarre and inscrutable, seething mass of machines that just crunch and jitter and spark. There was a negative review of the film in the LA Times by Charles Solomon, which criticized like all aspects of the movie. He didn't really like it, but he singles out Unicron, and I actually wrote this down. The great animated villains, like the Wicked Queen in Disney's Snow White, had motivations as compelling as any live-action character. Unicron apparently destroys entire worlds because it has nothing else to do. Now, personally, I think that's a kind of overly mechanistic way of looking at a film, where you break down what the motivation is, and if the motivation isn't good according to some arbitrary standards, then it's bad. Like, it's missing the forest for the trees by assuming a character has to be written a certain way to count as good. For me, this criticism misses the actual terrifying thing about the character, which is precisely that Unicron devours entire worlds because it has nothing else to do. There's just something inevitable and huge about it. It's this reminder that the universe is cold and senseless and will just kill you because it can. And it's like, oh, I'm more scared of this movie now than when I was a baby. The character Unicron most directly evokes, and by evokes I mean ripped off, they definitely just stole it, is Galactus from the Marvel Comics continuity universe thing. Look out for him in Phase 12.5, movie 103, Avengers: The Return of Jafar. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby came up with Galactus in 1966, way before Unicron. Unicron's human form has horns that kind of resemble Galactus's headdress thing. That might not be intentional, but I hope it was, because the rest of the character was clearly taken from that as well. Galactus is an invincible, or almost invincible, whatever, godlike entity that eats planets to survive. In an interview, Jack Kirby wrote this about Galactus. Galactus is a sort of god. He is beyond reproach, beyond anyone's opinion. And this is kind of what I find interesting about Unicron. Its life cycle just involves eating whole planets. It's not got a moral compunction to do it, it's just trying to survive, and it will genocide you. Like, that's like a different kind of horror to the sorts of evil that we normally think about in morality plays and children's media and stuff like that. And Stan Lee said this about him: Galactus was simply another in a long line of supervillains who we loved creating. We felt the only way to top ourselves was to come up with an evildoer who had almost godlike powers. Therefore the natural choice was sort of a demigod. But now what would we do with him? We didn't want to use the tired old cliché about him wanting to conquer the world. There were enough would-be world conquerors in the Marvel Universe and in all the other comic book galaxies. That was when inspiration struck. Why not have him not be a really evil person? After all, a demigod should be beyond mere good and evil. He'd just be, don't laugh, hungry. And the nourishment he'd require is the life force and energy from living planets. Now, the phrase, beyond mere good and evil, really sticks out to me here. Not just because it's the name of a book by Friedrich Nietzsche, like a work of philosophical aphorisms that are all about dealing specifically with how we build a morality in the wake of the discovery that our previous assumptions, like that there was a god who guaranteed good and evil, just didn't exist. Like, boiling it down, it's a book about how to build a philosophy in the wake of there not being a god. Like the exact themes that are being presented in this film, but also because that same phrase is repeated again in the tagline of this movie. It's even in the trailer.
Beyond good, beyond evil, beyond your wildest imagination. Transformers, the movie.
Unicron, like Galactus, is really compelling because in its own cartoonish, for kidsy way, it's dealing with actual moral and philosophical questions about how we live in the universe. Like, its very existence, its incursion into this ideological universe is this statement. There is no divine plan. You are all going to die. You are tiny. And the universe is gonna eat you. The sort of, ooh, I want Energon to fight a war so I can be in charge evil of Megatron is utterly fucking dwarfed
by the magnificent horror of this awful thing. I even feel bad calling Unicron awful. It just is. Basically, Unicron is an absolutely awesome character, and I really like it. And this tone shift doesn't just involve the deaths of a bunch of never-before-seen alien robots. In the beginning, Megatron and co. surprise attack an Autobot ship, and all 4 of the robots on it, who are characters from the show, just get murked. They get Game of Thrones. They just get killed. They die. And then they take that ship and they take it to Autobot City, and there's another big fight, and a bunch of them die. The wiki has a special article just for it. It's the Battle of Autobot City. And there's just like a list of all the characters who died in the first 10 minutes of this movie. Prowl's death is especially shocking. You see smoke emerge from his mouth and eyes and face as he goes out dead. This is a character from a show that you spent 2 seasons going, well, it's okay, they get put back together, it's fine, and he's just dead. Megatron repeatedly shoots Optimus Prime in the chest, and Prime haymakers him off the top of a building, and he falls multiple stories to the ground. And they're both fatally wounded and have to be dragged to safety. And it's not like the show where they get put back together. Optimus Prime dies. In the next scene, he gets this deathbed goodbye, and you watch the light fade from his eyes. It's worth talking about why this was happening. Hasbro were making some changes to the toy line, and they thought, well, in the movie, get rid of the old characters and introduce the new ones. And there is something still, even to me now, genuinely quite sad about this scene, especially after having just watched the show. We had 2 seasons of silly cartoon fights with Megatron, and this time they just murdered each other. The father figure of the show is just gone, and there isn't really anyone left to take his place. And that's really sad. And this obviously had a massive impact on its audience. Kids were crying in the theater and had to be dragged out. There were tons of complaints. Flint Dill has gone on the record as saying that he didn't really think it would have this kind of impact.
I'll get somebody saying, how come you killed Optimus Prime? I cried when you killed Optimus Prime. But the real answer is that we didn't know that he was an icon. It was a toy show. We just thought we were killing off the old product line and introducing a new product. And Optimus Prime was one of those guys.
They didn't think that they created a cultural icon, and in a way, I don't think they had created such an icon until they killed him. And what makes it so impactful isn't just that people know the character. If you had a scene like that for a character no one knew about, it wouldn't be that interesting. It's the specific juxtaposition of this with the kind of immortal, everything's fine, don't worry about it nature of the show. It just invented death in a universe where previously that couldn't happen. And for a kid, that's way, way more shocking than something just dying. It's that specific contrast. And I think this specifically is what makes the movie interesting, and makes the movie and the show, by relation, such a memorable pop cultural artifact. It's this specific change they made, which they didn't have to in the movie. In the show, as we explored, the story didn't really matter. No one blinked an eye when everyone was dead for 4 million years. Sometimes Megatron can fly. Doesn't matter. It's fine. Don't worry about it. All of a sudden, you do have to worry about it. People can die now. And that, to a kid, is a giant punch in the face. It's oh God, there's a real world out there with consequences, and I have to live in it. For me, the introduction of Galactus and the death of Optimus Prime are the actual beginning of the story of Transformers. There are actual real big problems, and not just these silly cartoony villains that you have to face. There's this existential dread you have to somehow deal with, and the people you look up to can go and just be gone, and you might have to take their place or learn to make do in a world without them. And how do you deal with that? And all of a sudden, this silly show about space robots has a meaningful story. And I think that's why I find the Transformers movie so interesting, and why I wanted to go back and think about it. I didn't get a pet until I was a bit older. So for me, the first time something that I knew about and was kind of close to me died was the cartoon robot dad. And the narrative of the movie actually explores these really interesting questions and ideas that you wouldn't expect to happen in the Transformers movie. Questions like, how do you deal with the fact that your existence is probably meaningless and everyone you love can and will die? These are like really important and difficult questions that we as humans have been striving to try and answer for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Like, that's basically all Friedrich Nietzsche did until he like went mad and hugged a horse and died. So ideally, the film would, in a perhaps kid-friendly way, explore and maybe try and find some answers to these questions. I said ideally there because it doesn't really. Look, I've bigged this movie up a lot, set up all the things about it that I like and the interesting concepts that it kind of almost explores. But the movie isn't very good. Like, for all the bits in it that I like or think are really interesting, there is a lot of bullshit. There's loads of scenes of characters just faffing about and saying one-liners that no one ever thought was cool. Most egregious is the guy who talks really, really fast, because his thing is he moves really fast, and the little one that, like, talks in rhymes.
What about me, Magnus? What about me? I can help, I want to help. What about me?
Fine, look behind. You go the wrong way. You fool, I say.
Absolutely, positively, definitely. Nobody can get the job done faster than I can. Nobody.
I've gone out of my way to not learn their names because I want their existence to slide from my memory as quickly as possible. If you think this film is actually good, it's because you forgot about 75% of it. But the 25% of stuff that's decent, it actually deals with some really interesting stuff sometimes. One scene I really quite like is when Unicron eats 2 of Cybertron's moons, and Bumblebee sets a bomb to detonate while it's being eaten by Unicron and they escape, and then it just isn't affected by the explosion at all, and they get sucked into Unicron and eaten, and they're just gone for the rest of the movie. And you only found out that they didn't die, like, right at the end.
It isn't even dented. Oh shit, what are we gonna do now?
They actually said a swear in the children's film. That's how bad things have got for the main characters. I actually find this really compelling even as an adult. Watching the characters see this horrible thing coming and try to formulate a way of attacking it and getting away, and watching it just fail utterly and watch them get sucked in anyway, is like really cool. And I think there's an important thematic thing there, like the characters are coping with the death of a lot of their friends, and even their leader, like someone tremendously important to them. And Unicron, if it represents nihilism or this understanding that life is meaningless, in a really direct, literalized way, the characters are trying to deal with and fail to deal with this gnawing emptiness that tells them that life is pain. And the whole movie is really about trying to escape the pull of these feelings and do something with your life, even though you know that at the end of it you die, and maybe all things don't really matter. Like, the ultimate question of the film basically is, oh shit, what do we do now? Like, even as an adult, I was kind of sucked in. Like, what's gonna happen? And the answer is a lot of garbage.
Nice dino, good dino, sweet dino. Won't you step into the nice spaceship for pretty please, pretty please, nice dino. I'm trying to get him into the shuttle automatic because I got it.
Oh, they're gonna mess about for a bit now. Galvatron will fly past and go, ooh, I'll get you. But I think we've established pretty successfully what the questions of the movie are. And that makes the scenes that are actually about that kind of cool and interesting and cute and stand out against the rubbish of the rest of the film. There's a bit where Cup is telling this like old war story to the Dinobots, and they're all sitting around and listening. And even Hot Rod's like, why are you doing this? What's the point of this? We've got stuff to do. And I find that scene actually really heartwarming and interesting. Like, in the middle of this emotionally fraught situation where bad stuff is happening and danger is present, the character with the most knowledge and experience sits down and says, let me tell you about another time it was bad. And you realise, oh, wow, well, this movie's not just messing about, it's actually making a point here about how, like, telling stories about other times when things were bad helps us remember that things aren't actually bad all the time, and there's lots of really good times where life seems like it's worth living, even if it ultimately isn't. And you're like, oh. There's like an interesting point here, and it takes place in a scene where a giant robot soldier is telling a bedtime story to a bunch of dinosaurs. Like, in the context of the movie, Unicron is really afraid of the matrix of leadership for some reason. Like, it's the only thing that poses a threat to it. And it's clear here what the matrix of leadership actually is. It's all the stuff that the Autobots are doing to continue carrying on
even when it seems pointless and like they can't win. It's all the little things that actually constitute a morality. That stuff is what allows the Autobots to carry on even when all of this bad stuff has happened. And there's the specific thing that it's called the matrix of leadership, and that begs the question of, like, what is leadership? What was the je ne sais quoi that made Optimus Prime the cool guy? And that's being explored here in how the characters deal with this tough situation. And what I find really interesting is that the guy who's picked as Prime's successor is objectively really bad at the specific things required of leadership. Like, Ultra Magnus even says in the scene, he's like,
But Prime, I'm just a soldier. I'm not worthy.
I am not a good successor to you. I'm just a guy who's good at the thing that he does. And he's right. Like, Ultra Magnus makes leadership decisions in the movie, and they always are basically just concessions to the Decepticons that actually make the situation worse. Like, he pulls this clever trick where he lets most of his ship be blown up so that, like, a little bit of it with them on it can escape. And that buys them, like, 5 minutes of time in the movie. And then after that, he creates a diversion so that the rest of his pals can escape, which gives him and the Matrix to Galvatron. Basically, he just loses. He's just the highest ranking guy. He's not a conceptual leader type figure. He's not actually good at making the kind of high concept decisions a leader should make, whatever those may be. I wonder if there's an answer to that question explored by the end of the story. So that begs the ultimate questions. What actually is leadership if it's not just being in charge? And how do we make all of this work? How do we make a positive change in a universe where it often seems hopeless? And this gets explored on the other ship, which also crash lands, but on a different planet. The one with Hot Rod and Cup and the Dinobots on it. So they encounter these piranha-like, Transformer-ish robots. And Cup's like, we shouldn't fight them. Let's do the universal greeting.
I'll use the universal greeting. Universal greeting?
Oh, we're going with this?
Ba weep grana weep niniba. Ba weep grana weep niniban.
What I find interesting about this is the sheer friction between the concept being explored and the way it's being explored. Like, the idea of, in this vast universe with multiple different languages and levels of intellect and consciousness, the idea that there is a universal phrase which to anyone means vaguely, hi, I'm your friend, is like super fascinating. Like, the idea of a universe where there is this central conceptual meaning and a way of communicating, like, that's a thing. And it's being explored by the robot saying, "Boo boo 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 ba."
See, the universal greeting works every time.
Ba wee boo. I can't be bothered to remember it. It's so embarrassing and obnoxious, and it just still makes me cringe. And even as a kid, I was like, "Oh no! I hope no one's watching me watching this." I just, oh god. And it doesn't even work either. They give them the candy, the laser candy, and they run out and they just capture them anyway. It doesn't work. And this is another like cool way that they juxtapose the reality of the story with the kind of silliness of the cartoon. They're like, no, this is real. That childish nonsense doesn't work here. You've got to be realistic. You should have slaughtered those other sentient beings. So they escape, they get on a ship, and they go to pick up the other Autobots, right? And then they have a repeat of the last encounter they just had. Like, they meet this new alien species that might be possibly hostile, and this time Cup's like, let's just fucking shoot them, we got them. And then we get the point of the movie. We get the moral core, the thesis of the film, and it is simultaneously the silliest thing ever, the worst, stupidest, most baddest scene ever, and also amazing. So Cup's gonna shoot them, right? And Hot Rod goes, no, I've discovered the moral core of the movie. Let's do the universal greeting again.
What was that universal greeting again? Never mind, I remember. Ba weep grana weep niniban.
And they do it.
whip ninny bong. Bar whip grana whip ninny bong.
And it works. And everyone's happy, and they form like a circle around them, and they do a big dance, and everyone's their friend. And then you're like, oh shit, the movie's actually making a point here with this incredibly childish thing. The point is the childishness. Like, the movie has just positioned the naive and childish desire to try to make friends in spite of everything as the actual radical, positive, moral choice to save the universe. Where you try the thing, even though the world has told you it won't work and it'll be bad. Just in case it might. Just in case you might actually be able to unite with these other people. And sometimes it works. Despite appearing on the surface to be a deeply cynical movie, what it's actually doing is setting up all the really good reasons that you should be cynical about the world and your place in it, and then saying, no, it's actually really good to be a bit naive sometimes, and maybe that's the thing, maybe that's the miraculous way that we build a morality in this universe. We, perhaps in a somewhat silly way, assert that this does matter and everything can work, even if it doesn't seem like it. And this is the film answering the question of what is leadership. Hot Rod goes, no, let's not do the tactically clever thing. Let's be unrealistic. Let's believe that a peaceful, mutually beneficial outcome is possible, and we can actually all get on and have this peaceful encounter. And it seems like an unrealistic and silly thing, but someone there asserting that they believe it is possible causes it to happen. And that is an actual philosophical statement about how to live in the world. To insist, if not demand, that better things are possible, even when it specifically doesn't seem possible at all. Literally this scene where all of a sudden there's an answer to the darkness of the universe, the song that plays over the scene is Weird Al Yankovic's Dare to Be Stupid. And that's literally the moral core of the film. You have to dare to be stupid. You have to believe in the incredibly silly, idyllic thing. Ultra Magnus and the other robots immediately get, like, forlorn and they want to be cynical again. And Horror says, no, don't think about it in terms of whether or not we have the MacGuffin. Think about it in terms of what we can do now to make it work. You know, there's this old thing that a philosopher guy said once. A leader isn't someone who tells you what to do and you obey because he's in a position of power over you. A leader is someone who talks and then you realize you believe them and you want that thing to happen as well. And that great philosopher's name was Optimus Prime. And I find this sort of positivity radically reshapes the universe thing happening as well with Unicron. Like, Galvatron tries to use the Matrix, and he doesn't really know how to understand it, but he does use it in some capacity because it suddenly causes Unicron to transform and unfold. And you actually get the coolest scene in the movie, this really awesome transformation sequence where he unfolds and moves and shifts. And it's got some of the best music ever. Like, I've listened to the Unicron theme medley like 1,500 times in my life over the last decade. It's just incredible. Just Unicron's theme in general is just this epic thing where it's a mix of synthesizers and drums and this industrial hissing. It's just... I realised that almost all of my musical interests spring forth in some fashion from the soundscape of the various iterations of the Unicron theme in the movie. It's also like really, really cool that the best scene in the movie is literally just a scene of something transforming. It's just... this is literally the film, and it's really cool. I love it. But this scene is also a continuation of the themes of the story. Like, we've just seen that the assertion that things can be made better allows the impossible to happen. People who would have been your enemies if you'd approached them differently are suddenly your friends. And with the mere application of the belief that something can be done about Unicron, all of a sudden Unicron becomes a comprehensible threat. Unicron becomes mortal in response to Galvatron trying to use the Matrix against him. And I find that super interesting. Like, that's literally the themes of the film. If you believe something can be done, all of a sudden maybe it actually can be. So Hot Rod crashes his ship right through Unicron's eye, And like all of a sudden, this basically godlike creature that eats planets and can't be harmed by massive moon-sized explosions and can suck people in even when they're trying to escape. All of a sudden, he's like gasping in pain, going, "Ah, ah," in his eye because it's been smashed apart. And the crash is timed with the first line of Stan Bush's song "Dare." We're getting this thing about daring again. It's like daring is, by definition, believing in something which it's not realistic to believe. And this isn't just a ridiculous 80s rock anthem about generic positivity playing over a toy commercial film. I mean, it is that, but in addition, it's a really interesting declaration that doing the supposedly clever thing, the realistic thing, isn't really enough. Sometimes you have to demand the impossible. One last scene that I really, really like is between Galvatron and Hot Rod when they're fighting. And Galvatron's like, we should probably just come out and be killed by me. I mean, we're all gonna die, right?
Come out, Autobot. We all must die sometime.
And Hot Rod goes, no, and punches him.
Not today, Galvatron.
And that exchange sums up the whole movie. You know, the universe is dark and scary, and maybe your life is meaningless, and maybe we're all just sitting around waiting to die, we're all just running out the biological clock, but we're not going to die today, and things can be made better. And this approach is what causes the Matrix to finally activate and get all glowy and stuff, and he's like, I have the power. That's a different show. I know it's a different show. I was making a reference. Stan Bush's The Touch starts playing, and he gets all glowy, and he transforms, he evolves, and he doesn't hit B, so it's permanent, and he transforms into Rodimus Prime.
Arise, Rodimus Prime.
Optimus.
Like, come on, you almost let me use you to make a really interesting point, movie, and then the main character's apotheosis is to transform into someone called Rodimus Prime. There's a reason that no one's taken this movie seriously for 30 years. Oh. And then he holds up the Matrix and Unicron explodes. The power of leadership and hope and unwarranted positivity in a dark universe has successfully vanquished the pessimistic nihilism that encroaches upon us all when bad things happen in our lives. Rodimus Prime discovered the magic of Xanax. Rodimus Prime makes a speech about how, like, now we're going to live in a world of peace where everyone can be a part of this beautiful new world. Just this ridiculously optimistic speech.
We march forward to a new age of peace and happiness, till all are one.
And it's like, yeah, and then Unicron's head flies past, and that's the end. It just ends on that speech with the music playing, just like that. We beat you. Let's all live in peace and happiness forever. Done. Credits. Go. Just have a nice day, everyone. I love it. So yeah, it's not really that great a movie. And the scenes that stand out, especially to the kids who remembered it from the time they first saw it, they stand out usually because it was busy killing a character that was well known and important to you. Like, it wasn't impactful because it was good, it was impactful because it was horrifying in, like, a really terrible way for a kid. It didn't really stand out because of its quality. Like, I find that I keep every couple of years coming back to this movie in some form. This movie is unmistakably a kind of standard hero's journey, transition into adulthood thing for Hot Rod. Growing up, I appreciate that far more because, like, I and a lot of the kids who watch this movie have had to mature into adults and encounter some of the emotions that were first brought up for some kids in this film. A lot of people have had to deal with the death of a parent or someone really close to them and learn to cope with that. And it's hard not to, in that process, look back on a movie that is kind of about dealing with those things. In a way, the Transformers movie is more meaningful to adults now than it ever could have been for kids then. I think I find myself coming back to this movie because I never feel like I'm quite done thinking about it, because its meaning keeps changing for me as I keep changing as a person. I, as a person, have grown up and changed a lot in the last 10, 15, 20 years of my life. A lot of things in the world have changed, and
in a way, one of the ways that you learn to deal with it and fully appreciate those things is you go back to something that you felt you knew and look at it with the benefit of the new sight that you have. I find that I keep doing this with the Transformers movie in particular. Like 5 years ago, when I was just really into how clever I thought I was, I used to write for this website called smugfilm.com. Like, that was supposed to be a joke, like, haha, we know how silly this looks. But really, no, everyone on that site was pretty smug, especially me. And 5 years ago now, in 2014, I wrote a piece about how the Transformers movie is actually about the Nietzschean ideal. How it's this, like, radical rebuttal to philosophical nihilism. Like, that was incredibly silly, but there was a time in my life where I genuinely felt that way about the film, and felt that way about how to think about the world. And one of the ways that I allowed myself to develop was by reinvestigating what I had previously thought of as just this fun movie that I thought was cool when I was a kid. Like, in a way, it's only through nostalgia that we understand the present, by fully accepting how we used to see something. Don't read that article, by the way. It's really not that great. In fact, I still have some beef with the guy who ran the site. He would edit the articles to be what he thought sounded better, and he would cut a bunch of the words out. Like, I remember my original article being like twice as long, and he like cut out all my favorite bits and reworded some of it, and it just, I don't know, it just kind of annoyed me. Don't read the old article anyway. It was bad before it was edited. We are all, in a very specific sense, undergoing this eternal and never truly finished transformation. We're always becoming something else, and this is one of the ways that we come to understand who we are now, is by looking at the things from our past with the new lens that we have. And, like, that, I think, is the value of nostalgia. You have the ability to look back not just on something from the past, but on how you were in the past. I think a lot of people are nostalgic for movies, not because there's something particularly great living in the 80s or something, but because being a kid in the 80s, when the worst thing that could possibly happen to you that day was the cartoon dad robot died. Like, that is a really nice time to be alive, that we all kind of, on some level, do appreciate more now that we don't have it. We're coming up on, like, in a couple of months, the 10-year anniversary of Lindsay Ellis's video about the Transformers movie. She hates it. She thinks it's terrible. Like, 10 years. I wasn't joking earlier in the video where I talked about how old I felt. Like, in a way, this video is like a very brief midlife crisis for me, where I look back on how I used to think about some stuff and my old YouTube videos and the things I used to do, and try and figure out where I've changed and where I'm going and what I'm supposed to do. And I think the reason why I turn back to Transformers is because it shouts the loudest and clearest the most valuable message for someone in that state, which is demand the impossible. Believe that it can be better, even if it doesn't seem that way. And that's how finding the way out becomes possible. And I guess I never really stopped believing in the silly cartoon. I just find better and better ways to intellectualize it. For the first time in my life, I feel old. I felt like I was 19 until I was 26. And now I feel like an old person. And it's made me go, well, who am I? And looking back on all my old videos, it makes me think, wow, I thought this was funny. And maybe I miss having that much future ahead of me. But it makes me happy to be who I am now. It's fun realizing that while the past had its benefits, the present and the future are pretty cool too. This movie is a part of my process of thinking about life and the world, so it's been fun using it as an excuse to talk about these ideas now. So, yeah, thanks for tuning in to my midlife crisis. It's over now. I feel good again. Thank you very much to the people who support me doing this. because I literally couldn't be here doing this without you. So for me now, the Transformers movie is unavoidably about dealing with having to mature into a world where no one really knows what's going on, and you have to somehow figure it out for yourself. And that makes the movie interesting to me even now. Even though it's measurably bad, I guess the movie was more than meets the eye. Oh my god.
I'd like to taste a real Italian coffee, please.
What is the real Italian coffee?
Espresso. Espresso or Americano?
You mean black coffee?
Yes, Lavazza. Discover the Italian coffee experience in all its forms. Lavazza, more than Italian.
I'm out of range.
Can we do this forever? That's a question that every TV show has to answer, and the answer is almost always no. After so many years, the writers burn through ideas and the audience loses interest.
Look at him. He's laughing.
But it's hard to know when that happens. And you might think, this isn't very good, or at least it's not as good as it used to be.
I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you've actually left them.
The Office is pretty great. It's a mockumentary sitcom with relatable character-driven humor, led by Michael Scott, a boss who's desperate for attention.
Uh-oh! Better put on your ski boots!
Dude, what is this vulture
So when Steve Carell
doing?
left the show after season 7, a lot of people bailed. I mean, he was the main character.
We were thinking maybe we could keep this thing going.
What? But the last 2 seasons aren't that bad, and I think Michael's departure offers an insight into how The Office is structured. See, I'd argue that Michael isn't the main character. It's Jim. Jim is the surrogate for the audience by being a normal person. Michael dominates the space, and that's the joke. He's incompetent. He doesn't really deserve to be a boss, and he doesn't really deserve to be the lead in a fictional documentary. But he is. The core comedy is not necessarily what Michael says, but the way his subordinates react.
He's back!
Ideally, the show would have stopped when Michael left, but replacing him with another obnoxious personality kind of works, at least as a concept. Andy Bernard is the regional manager in Season 8 and most of Season 9.
It's unbelievable.
But under the right circumstances, I think Dwight should have been the replacement. First, it would have echoed how Michael got the job. His management style didn't matter, but he was the best salesman.
Dwight is an obvious candidate for my job. He has the best sales record in the office. He loves the work. He is, however, an idiot.
Dwight is also a more relevant character. The writers tried to develop a spin-off that focused on his life as a farmer, so it shows they were confident enough to make him a main character. And Dwight annoys his coworkers more than Michael ever did, which is comedy gold.
This cost me $129.
Yes.
I guess they wanted to stretch his manager arc to the series finale so they could end on a high note.
Dwight Schrute is manager!
But it leaves Dwight in a vacuum for 2 seasons, and it trashes Andy's character. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Initially, it looked like Will Ferrell was going to be the next manager, because he guest starred for 4 episodes. And I'm really glad that he wasn't, because I don't know what his character is supposed to be.
They are trying to figure me out, and I don't like it. It's about to get all stupid up in here!
He starts off as a humble guy who's compatible with Michael.
Did that just happen?
Then he's a cool guy who everybody likes.
They're all treating him like he's some sort of god.
Then he's rude.
Enough about your baby, okay?
Then he's a maniac for making Andy drink soap.
Drink some soda.
Oh, and he has a peanut allergy because why not?
Oh, wow! You're getting nut particles all in the air.
And that's just the first episode. He spends the second episode worrying about his stage fright.
The Dundies are coming together!
And now he's a bad joke teller.
I'm not much of a performer, unless you count singing in the shower.
In the third episode, he's a terrible salesman.
That is cold, sir. Absolutely cool. You know what? It was a complete waste of my time.
And he struggles with an eating disorder by grabbing cake and screaming at it.
What am I doing? Come on, Angelo. No!
It's funny, right?
No!
In the last episode, he's a sexist.
D'Angelo is a huge sexist.
And a fake juggler.
Oh!
Then he leaves the show by injuring himself.
Doctor is in!
I don't know what the that was.
Luckily, they stayed in-house and picked Andy.
Is there anyone who maybe was a little underwhelming at first, but now seems like a safe, if not slightly unexciting choice?
Season 8 had to convince people that Andy was a worthy follow-up to Michael, and it's pretty good.
You don't have to prove anything. We like you as regional manager.
But I don't think they knew how to write the show without Michael. Michael faked a call to impress Ryan.
Ah, this is a very important client. But I have the most important client sitting in front of me, my boss. I will call him back.
Oh,
later.
no. Customer service is obviously a priority one.
So Andy fakes a call to impress a client.
There is nothing more important to me right now than this meeting.
Really? Because your mother is dead.
Michael put his leg on Jim's desk, so Andy has to sit on the desk. Michael misled people.
I took her to the hospital, and the doctors tried to save her life. They did the best that they could, and she is going to be okay.
What is wrong with you?
And so does Andy.
Dwight is no longer with us.
What?
He's gone, damn it! He's been promoted to VP of Saber Retail, and he's staying in Florida forever.
So, he's alive.
But you can't transfer Michael's traits onto Andy without the underlying motivations. See, Michael is a very specific character. Everything he does is filtered through his need to be liked.
Do I need to be liked? Absolutely not. I like to be liked. I enjoy being liked. I have to be liked. But it's not like this compulsive need to be liked.
Michael wants to be the funniest guy in the room. He wants applause and admiration. He wants to support women and minorities because it makes him look good. But the more he tries, the more he reveals how ignorant he is.
What you're saying is extremely misogynistic.
Yes. Thank you. Women can do anything.
I'm saying that you're being sexist.
No, I'm being misogynistic.
Even his stupidity is motivated by attention. Michael understands that intelligence is valuable, so he pretends to be smarter than he is.
Sometimes the smartest people don't think at all.
You just came up with that.
As I was saying, yeah.
Michael is known for mispronouncing words. But keep in mind, the joke is not Michael is dumb, but that Michael is reaching for words beyond his vocabulary because he wants to be perceived as intelligent.
This is a good one. A particular concern for office workers is a sedimentary lifestyle which can contribute. Yes? They're trying to make me an scapegoat. Well, well, well. How the turntables. I am not to be truffled with. This would be a huge coup, people. There's the X-axis. The odds of them getting together were insurmountable. It is ergonomically correct. He can heal leopards. Michael. I'm Jesus, David, and you know why? Because Phyllis, a woman, has usurped my role as Santa. Michael.
You're going to HELL double hockey sticks.
Tell him to call me ASAP as possible. Thanks. Respect. RESPCT. I am downloading some N3P music. That's sort of an oaky.
What was that?
Jim Albert is smudging
Making smoke. Several times a day, Michael says words that are way beyond my vocabulary.
I know where this is going.
Do you? Okay. Remember Spider Face?
No.
Okay, because the quote was, cut off your nose to Spider Face.
Okay.
So imagine my surprise when I heard this joke in season 9. I just got off the phone with my doctor, and turns out I contracted chlamydia from Aaron. First of all, no one is that stupid. Especially not Andy. He went to Cornell and he has one of the best vocabularies in the office. I feel lachrymose. He even speaks a little French. I'm just bidding a bon voyage à la mon petite fiancée. I'm pretty sure he knows how to pronounce chlamydia. In fact, I'm positive because he led a sex ed class in season 7. Herpes, like all STDs, is a consequence of sex. Can anyone else name any other consequences? So what's the underlying motivation for Andy mispronouncing chlamydia? It's not to be liked.
You're fine. Get out of my Andy.
For some reason, they turned Andy into a douchebag in season 9.
David Wallace sent him on an outward-bound wilderness adventure for a whole month to make him more decisive and confident.
Right. Andy goes through 4 stages, and they're all really pathetic. First, he's rude towards Nellie.
Hey, all right. Whoa, suck.
It's supposed to be revenge for stealing his job, but he decided to keep her on his payroll. When can it start? And again, what's the motivation here? Michael insults people, but it's unintentional.
No, that is the fun of this place. I call everybody faggy. Why would anyone find that offensive?
Okay, I think that's sort of just like if he's lame or something like that.
That's what faggy means.
No, not really. So by the end of an episode, he learns his lesson. I know you are. Michael is endearing because of how far he goes to fix his mistakes.
Talk to me. I did it.
But Andy is being mean just to be mean. I wanted to talk to you about working relationships. It's going to be real.
Not necessarily.
No, I'm going to make sure that it is. Then he goes boating for 8 episodes because Ed Helms had to film The Hangover Part 3. But there are better ways to explain a character's absence.
Where's Andy?
He's on one of his honeymoons.
What?
He made non-refundable deposits on his honeymoons, so he's just knocking them off one at a time. He leaves Aaron and turns into a crazy person. When Andy gets back, Aaron breaks up with him and he acts like a child.
This is a really uncomfortable situation that you've contrived.
Really uncomfortable situation? And finally he decides to pursue a singing career. He fires himself by pooping on David Wallace's car, and he has a meltdown at an audition.
You can't just sit here and cry.
Oh, I can't so just sit here and cry.
So, I don't get it. Why would the writers build him up just to tear him down? Why would they kill a relationship they spent 3 years developing? Why would they sabotage themselves when they already had a handicap? Well, a lot of veteran writers left the show after season 8, most notably Mindy Kaling and BJ Novak, which is why Kelly and Ryan aren't in the last season. Shortly after Kelly left, Ryan quit, and also moved to Ohio for what he claimed were unrelated reasons. But my theory is that they wanted to make Dwight manager by the finale. But the reason he wasn't the manager already was because of his personality. Sorry I freaked you guys out. So while they were maturing Dwight, which I'll talk about later, they could also tear Andy down to make Dwight look good by comparison. And if that's what they were going for, I guess it works.
Hey, Burning Man, if it's not selling out too much, you might want to throw on a tie.
But at what cost? Another reason might be because they had no idea what to do with Aaron, and she could have something to do if she pursued another relationship.
So good, so good, so good. I got what I need and it feels so good.
There's a trope called the love dodecahedron, which basically means that most of the cast overlaps in a romantic relationship. Pam and Roy are engaged, but Jim's in love with Pam, so Jim dates Karen instead. Pam breaks up with Roy and retroactively goes on 2 dates with Danny Cordray. Toby is in love with Pam, but she's unaware. Michael has a crush on Pam, but she rejects him. Pam gets back together with Roy, and then they break up again. Jim breaks up with Karen and eventually marries Pam. Pam is a target of jealousy for Jan, who's dating Michael. Michael breaks up with Jan and dates Holly. Holly is transferred, and in the meantime, Michael dates Pam's mom, Helene. Michael breaks up with Helene, and Michael proposes to Holly when she moves back. Of course, Michael has a crush on Ryan, who wants nothing to do with Michael. Ryan has an on-again, off-again relationship with Kelly. Kelly dates Daryl to make Ryan jealous. Daryl and Gabe pursue Val, and she chooses Daryl. Gabe dates Aaron, but only after Aaron breaks up with Andy because she finds out that Andy was engaged to Angela. Angela marries Senator Lipton, who has an affair with Oscar. Angela has an affair with Dwight while she's with Andy and the senator. Kelly kisses Dwight. Dwight seduces Nellie in Florida. Nellie kisses Toby. Andy and Dwight pursue Aaron when she starts working at Dunder Mifflin. Kelly gets a crush on Andy when he's trying to date Aaron. Andy and Aaron date again, but they break up when Andy goes boating. Aaron dates Pete, and the show ends with Dwight and Angela getting married.
Love triangle drama. Well, we're down the end, though. The hero got the girl. Who saw that coming? I did.
Some relationships are better than others, and some relationships are meant to be comedic. But some relationships scream, I don't know what to do with this character. And I think Aaron is a clear example of that. Aaron has 3 traits to work with. She's quirky, she's dumb, and she's an orphan. So love stories provide a lot of mileage. Crushes, embarrassment, flirtation, big romantic gestures, competition, jealousy, dates, kissing, more jealousy, more kissing, secrecy, and a breakup. Just do that 3 more times and you've got a character on a sitcom regardless of personality. I think it's pretty telling that once Aaron and Pete get together, they don't interact anymore except for when Aaron loses a competition.
Oh, sorry, I'm mad! I don't like losing, I thought I was going to win!
Which begs the question, why is he with her? Aaron had to break up with Andy because their relationship was built on a superficial plotline, not compatibility.
You know, we both been into each other at different times and just never really synced up. Now we're in this weird dance. I already lost my interest.
And her relationship with Gabe doesn't even make sense.
Thank God he's my boss, because I would not have said yes to a first date if I didn't have to, but it's been great.
She's not attracted to him and she doesn't even like him. They're simply together because it makes Andy jealous. Andy has a girlfriend in season 8 because it makes Aaron jealous.
Jessica is my super serious girlfriend who is seriously awesome and seriously sexy.
The longer a TV show is on, the more you get these half-baked obstacles. Daryl can't be with Val because she has a boyfriend. Michael can't be with Holly because she has a boyfriend. Dwight can't be with Angela because she has a boyfriend. Twice. And yeah, Jim and Pam are structured around 2 intersecting love triangles. But they're believable. Pam and Roy are engaged, and Jim and Karen are friends for 7 episodes before they date.
Be good.
The difference is Jim and Pam have concrete identities outside of their relationships. Jim is funny, modest, and easygoing. So when he dates Karen or Katie, I know what they like about it.
Hi.
I'm Jim, by the way.
Katie.
Hi, Katie.
Oh, you sit out there, no?
I do. That's what I'm best known for. She's sitting out there.
Pam is too complacent to make any big changes, which explains why she's with her high school sweetheart. So when they finally get together, there's still a story to tell. And that includes marrying kids, but specifically the mundane moments of a long-term relationship.
Wait, this is the magic. I ain't got all day.
It's funny you bring that up because
Oh, man. It's just like that, huh?
And that's the beauty of television. People can change in organic ways. Jim is supposed to be cool, so the later seasons experiment with the opposite.
Wow, I'm just gonna rewind and back off a bit, so...
Pam embraces a dorkier side of herself.
What up, 212?
And she loves vaudeville.
I give me takes.
I don't know who you are anymore.
But characters can only change if they're allowed to, which is pretty rare for a sitcom. The beginning of a TV show is a blank slate. The writers get to explore the characters, but as the comedy progresses, you'll notice a concentration of behavior.
Kevin, can't decide between a fat joke and a dumb joke, boom roasted.
Here's a joke from season 2. Here's a joke from season 5.
Cookie, Kevin, cookie.
There is no cookie, Kevin.
You're a cookie. Mm-hmm.
Here's a joke from season 9.
Angela's cats are cute. So cute that you just want to eat them. But you can't eat cats.